Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Have you heard about DeepSeek? A Chinese company barely more than a year old has exploded onto the market with its latest open source AI. In a virtual instant, it has overtaken ChatGPT as the top-rated Gen AI in the US Apple App Store and turns the global AI sector upside down. Is it better? Maybe. Faster? Yes. Cheaper? Yes. And that's exactly what I want to talk to our next guest about. And that's Dr. Joe Sutherland. He's worked as an executive, public servant, and educator for the Dow Jones 30, the White House, and our nation's top universities. And he is a co-author of the book, Analytics the Right Way, a business leader's guide to putting data to productive use. Dr. Sutherland, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So since you've been involved with crafting policy around AI research, what's your take on safely using AI? Do we need more regulations or not?
But no, it's a great question. It's always a careful balancing act. On one end, you want to make sure that we protect consumers, that we encourage businesses to innovate. But on the other end, you don't want to restrict the amount of dynamism that's available in the economy. And when you try to protect consumers, sometimes you can actually end up restricting our ability to innovate. So balancing those two things is really important. The approach that I've suggested has been to, number one, let's just call out, for example, the bad actors. People who are doing things like using ChatGPT or other types of generative AI technologies for fraudulent activities, those should be made illegal, right? And you could probably even make them illegal just by further defining the types of fraud that those people would be perpetuating within existing code structures. The bigger problem, as I see it, is that you need some sort of federal regulation to protect consumers. Because if, for example, I live in the state of Georgia, I think you're in the state of Illinois. If you pass some sort of law here in Georgia and somebody doesn't like it, they want to keep doing the bad stuff that they're doing, they could just move to Illinois and keep doing it to anybody who lives here because of the internet. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a role for federal regulation to protect consumers.
Yeah. And what's the biggest misconception you see when it comes to businesses using data?
Well, I think the biggest misconception is this idea that if you have all the data, you have all the answers. And, oftentimes when I talk to my clients, and I mean, actually I had recently a software developer was one of my clients. They have, millions of users. And they were sold on this idea that if they were just collecting all of this data on, I think it was like a marketing experiment that they had done where they were trying to see, they spent about, I think, $12 million on marketing in a few different countries. They wanted to see if that marketing was actually effective or not. They were sold on this idea by some of the cloud providers that if they had centralized all the data, they didn't really have to think about how to answer the questions later on. They would just have to ask them later on. And the problem was that once they started asking the questions, they couldn't get the answers. I think that the key to getting really good answers from your data is not collecting all of the data. I think it's collecting the right data and, furthermore, asking the right questions.
Well, Joe, again, really appreciate your expertise on this topic. How can businesses get smarter by using AI and machine learning in their operations?
I think the first key is they have to realize that it's not as expensive as it's made out to be. I had one of my clients come and say they had been quoted by one of the big four consultancies. I think what they were trying to do was build an AI agent that would essentially summarize documents in their SharePoint file servers and respond to employee queries so that they could speed up back office processes. It's kind of like a better enterprise search application. They're actually very cost efficient. They're very effective. They provide richer customer interactions. There's a reason why people like them. But the quote that they got was about $1 million for a proof of concept. And, so not only are you spending $1 million, you're not even getting something that's going to fully work. And I responded to my client. I said, why don't you just come over? I teach a class on how to build these types of applications. For my students, it only takes them about a day. Why don't you bring your money over here, cut it in half. I'll charge you half price. I'll give you a few of my students. I'll pay them double the consultant's rate, and then I'll just pocket the rest. Right?
Mm,
I think the reason that people think AI is so expensive is I think because they're paying the price of being underinformed. And so that's, I think, the biggest misconception is if you actually know where to look for the right answers and where to do the right development, it can, make you, maybe 9 figures for every 6-figure investment that you're making.
absolutely. Again, I'm chatting with Dr. Joe Sutherland, who has worked as an executive public servant and educator. Really fascinating background. We'll dive deeper into Dr. Sutherland's background in a few minutes, but he's also an author of a brand new book, Analytics, the Right Way, a business leader's guide to putting data to productive use. And in your book, Joe, you have some really fun cartoon illustrations. Were you trying to tell businesses to lighten up? What was the meaning behind that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, every single business book I've ever read has this kind of intense wind up at the beginning, and the conclusion is like 3 chapters long just to kind of re-summarize the information that was already shared. And, me and my co-author, Tim Wilson, we've been great friends for a long time. We've always had kind of a funny sense of humor. And we thought, man, we kind of need to make fun of ourselves because we are writing a business book. And so the cartoons were an approach to trying to do that.
I love it. Well, again, we're chatting with Dr. Joe Sutherland, co-author of Analytics, the Right Way, a business leader's guide to putting data to productive use. Joe, when we come back in a moment, we're going to continue our conversation about the future of AI. And I'm excited for that conversation. You're listening to Get Down to Business. As always, you can get in touch with me on my website, syklein.com. Or, of course, find us on your favorite podcast app. Just search for Get Down to Business. But do me a favor, my friends. Be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share. A quick break. We're going to continue our conversation about AI in just a moment. Hey, welcome back to Get Down to Business. So, chatting with Dr. Joe Sutherland, who has worked in some really, really fascinating industries and has, as we've been saying, has worked as an executive public servant and educator for the Dow Jones 30, the White House, and our nation's top universities. Joe, how did you get interested in this topic?
It's a great question. When I was back in like 1998, I was just a kid, actually. I started programming in this language called BASIC. You remember BASIC?
Yeah.
It's funny, actually, when I do talks to, Gen Z audiences, they don't even know what it is. But it was a great exposure to using computers to really make a difference in how efficient we can be in the world. Later in life, I got really interested in politics and, eventually ended up working at the White House for President Barack Obama in a number of capacities. And those two things combined, I guess around maybe 2013-ish, in a way that enabled me to go and start looking at how we programmatically approach the analysis of data to make decisions using computers. And as I got my PhD in this field, which now today is called quantitative social sciences, there was this exploration of how we could use natural language processing to process text in the same way we would process numbers to generate inferences about the world, and then furthermore take actions based on those inferences. I started a startup as a result of all these studies that kind of brought those threads together. It was called Prattle. And at Prattle, what we did is we used natural language processing to digest Federal Reserve communications and then use those outputs that we digested to create a data feed that hedge funds would use to trade on, based on what the communications implied about monetary policy. It's all somewhat technical, but suffice to say, you hear a lot about the Federal Reserve today. A lot of people have a lot of money riding on the decisions that they make, and this was a data product that would help computers automatically make decisions on how to trade around those policy decisions. And that was kind of the entree into the space.
Interesting. So can you predict the future of AI, especially when it comes to how businesses operate? Where do you expect we'll be in 5 years?
It's a great question. I do see a little bit too much of a pivot towards this anthropomorphization of AI. That's just, we treat AI as human a lot of times, I think, in business. And it's because consultants are breathless with the way they approach these things. I mean, they truly are incredible technologies, especially the large language models like ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity, et cetera. They seem like you're talking to a human on the other end of the line. But the more we treat artificial intelligence technologies as human, the more we kind of obfuscate and diffuse accountability around the choices that either we make and how we develop them or we make and how we use them, including the goals that they optimize for in business and in life. And, the more recent thing I've been seeing is, the more you formalize a way for people to point the finger at, the nameless computer, the more accountability and performance you lose. And so I really think over the next 5 years, we're going to have a rebalancing in how we evaluate performance for people and how we hold them accountable to using these technologies to deliver effective business results.
Well, again, I've been chatting with Dr. Joe Sutherland, the author of a fantastic read, and I don't say that lightly. It's called Analytics, the Right Way, a Business Leader's Guide to Putting Data to Productive Use. Joe, I want to make sure our listeners can find the book and get in touch with you. How can they do that?
Well, I'd be happy if you visit us on jlsutherland.com, and you can also find the book on amazon.com. I think it's running at a discount right now, so get it today.
I love it. Joe, thanks so much for joining us, and come back real soon. That's a wrap for us this week on Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. We've covered a lot, and we will archive this show on your favorite podcast app, and of course on my website, syklein.com. And I love to hear from our listeners, so please reach out. Got a contact page, and I respond to every single message. To success, let's get down to business. Can't wait to see you and talk with you next week. I promise you we're going to have a jam-packed lineup. You don't want to miss it. Again, Get Down to Business every Sunday, 6 p.m. right here on 856 The Answer, wherever podcasts can be found.